A first-of-its-kind conference on improving air travel for people with disabilities was held today. It was convened after CBC News reported on several cases of alleged mistreatment by airlines. Some said that they had been left feeling dehumanized. Others reported serious injuries. The Minister of Diversity, Inclusion and Persons with Disabilities had this to say after that meeting.
And I can tell you it was a very open and robust discussion. And I think, to the credit of the industry, I think they realized and they saw that there needs to be changes to be made. And one of the things that we talked about, it's not just about the one thing. There's no one airline. There's no one airport. There's no one person that is going to be able to fix this issue. It's incumbent upon all of us to do this work together.
For more, we're joined now by CBC's Marina von Stackelberg, who is in Ottawa and who was at that summit. Marina, what did you hear from the people who were there?
Yeah, so we heard some pretty intense stories of people who felt like they had been mistreated, humiliated. In some cases, their mobility devices were lost or broken. And then, of course, some very serious situations of them actually being injured as they tried to get through an airport and onto an airplane and then back off again. And that really is what has prompted this accessibility summit that happened for one day here in Ottawa. It brought together advocates as well as airline and airport executives, along with federal authorities, including the people that do security and border services. And there were talks about the experiences. And one big trend through all of the conversations was that in Canada, it really is a patchwork where someone with a disability heads to the airport and they don't know what their experience is going to be like. And that is incredibly anxiety-inducing. One woman that I spoke to is Joanne Smith. She has been in a wheelchair for over 3 decades, and she says air travel in Canada has gotten worse, especially within the last few years after the pandemic. She says that she has had her head hit on the overhead compartment. She's been dropped. She's almost had her legs twisted to a point where they've been broken. Have a listen to some of what she had to tell us.
You never know what to expect when you get to the airport and when you land in a destination as to what kind of service you're going to get. And it's always a fear. It causes anxiety. It causes stress because often people haven't had appropriate training. And when you're having assistance being lifted onto an aircraft and when you're paralyzed, you can be dropped. I've certainly been dropped. I haven't broken any limbs, but it can happen. It's unfortunate some of the things that I have actually experienced in terms of bodily harm and just the indignity of being told to get up and walk because you don't look disabled.
She says when she travels to the UK or the US, she breathes a sigh of relief because she knows that in those countries there is more standard care and she knows what she's going to get. She even talked about traveling around the world to countries in Africa where she's had better treatment. We also heard from other people in the disability community. For example, people with severe allergies who say that airline staff don't want to announce the fact that they have an allergy over the intercom so that people are aware. I also spoke to a man who's deaf, and he said, you know, things like being called up to board or having an announcement on an airplane, those are things that he can't hear. He said he shared a story at this accessibility summit where he got put in secondary screening and he waited there for half an hour. And then all of a sudden someone came over and they were very angry at him because they said, well, we've been calling you for half an hour. And he said, I told you that I'm deaf and that you would need to come and speak to me. And he said it was a humiliating, mortifying experience. So all of these kind of stories have brought all these people together to say that this really needs to change how people fly across Canada.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of accounts from people with disabilities talking about problems that they have faced. But to your point, I mean, are there any signs that things will or are changing?
Yeah, so we did have airline executives there, including from WestJet and Air Canada. And again, they apologized for these instances and say that they're working on major changes, training staff more, creating more sort of policies on how to deal with this. And they did make 2 specific commitments today. The first one is around data, tracking it and sharing it about how people with disabilities experience their time at the airport and on the airline. And so there's been a commitment to sharing that information more broadly. In the U.S., airlines have to report if they've had an incident with someone with a disability. There's also a promise to standardize the medical forms that disabled people with disabilities have to fill out. And so these are forms that the airlines sometimes require. It requires someone going to their doctor and getting a medical form filled out to prove a disability that they've already proven. Sometimes we heard from someone up to $80, and all of these forms are different. So if you're flying with a different airline, then you have to fill out a different form. So there's been a promise to ensure that there is some sort of standardization here. But the federal government did not say that they would start any fines. They did not say that they would, bring in any sort of extra regulations to ensure that the airlines actually follow through on these promises. Have a listen to the transport minister.
I mean, you have a government that is there, that wants things to change, but we also have to see what the companies are doing, what they're ready to do, because again, they want to succeed. And we're not here to point fingers at companies or airports, this and that. The only way we're pointing fingers is to say you're part of the solution, not only part of the problem, but also part of the solution. What are you going to do?
You know, some advocates said today they want fines. They want an airline to have to pay if they damage or lose their mobility device. But again, the federal government says at this point they want to see the airlines follow through on this, but made no commitment today on if or when they had to do that. Advocates do say, though, that having this summit and having everyone in one room, the government, advocates, and the airlines themselves, was a big step forward.
CBC's Marina von Stackelberg in Ottawa. Thank you.
No problem.
And my next guest is Ryan Lachance. He doesn't feel safe to travel anymore after he was dropped by Air Canada crew. He joins us now from White Rock, BC. Ryan, it's good to speak with you tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Ryan, how does it feel that how does this news from the summit today sit with you? How do you feel about it?
Well, it's a start, but it's nowhere near what needs to be done. I am very disappointed that the government didn't come through with some sort of penalizing program for damage of equipment, or if in fact we get dropped or something like that happens. It's really sad that's not being taken place. So
this summit, it's giving voice to those like yourself who have these lived experiences, passengers who have disabilities, who have not been treated properly, and as in your case, were injured. How important is it to have that voice?
It's extremely important because there are so many people within the disabled community that don't have a voice or don't think they have a voice. So it's very important that our story is being told and our story is being shared with the country and with the world. It's very important.
To that, I just want to share a little bit remind our viewers about your story. Now, you have quad spastic cerebral palsy, and you use a motorized wheelchair. And in your case, the equipment that you need was not brought, and subsequently you were dropped and you were injured. And I know CBC has spoken to you about this before, but just remind us what was that like? I mean, I know you were bedridden for days as a result of that.
Yes, I was bedridden, and not only was it hard on me, but it was hard on my caregivers because they had to do a whole bunch of extra work to make sure that I was recovering properly, and it just made me scared to travel. And I'm a professional stand-up comedian, and I love going across our country and across the United States, and it just makes me nervous to step onto a plane again and continue with my career. So,
one of the things they said today was that the Liberal government wants to make sure that Canada is a world leader in accessible air travel. How far away from that are we, based on your experience?
Very far away. I mean, today was a good starting point, but that's all it was a starting point. I think they have to, again, be held accountable for the things that go wrong, and they have to have standardized practices within all airlines within the country to ensure people like myself can travel safely and just enjoy our flights like everyone else.
You say this is a good start, and certainly the conversation has been building. There's been, you're sharing your experience. Others have, over the last months, been sharing theirs and being more public about these sort of things that have happened. Do you think this summit, is there going to be change that comes from it? I mean, you say you're afraid or you're fearful right now of the kind of travel that you need to do for your job. Do you see a time when you might feel better about things?
Yes. I mean, as long as people stick to their word and these things do come in place. But I still believe that a standardized practice of finding airlines when things like this will definitely deter it from happening again. But again, this is a good start. So it's better than nothing, I guess.
Let me ask you before I let you go here, when you say you hope that there will become a standardized practice, in your case, you needed specific equipment brought. Obviously, depending on the disability that somebody is dealing with, it would be different needs that they have. As part of that standardized practice is communication with that passenger. I mean, that's got to be part of what you would like to see as be standard, asking those who need something what it is they need specifically, right?
Exactly, because we are the people that know our bodies the best and our situation the best. So all it takes is asking very simple questions and ensuring that we have enough time to get off and on the flight safely, and it's not affecting the other travelers and everything else. Because the last thing we want to do is slow down someone's travel, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we're taken care of properly. So, and
Ryan,
it all starts with open communication. I'm sorry.
No. I was just going to say that, as a stand-up comedian, I'm sure that you never envisioned yourself having to be a champion for this cause. But I do really appreciate your time tonight with your personal story and sharing your opinions here. That's Ryan Lachance, who's in a wheelchair and who was dropped by Air Canada crew. He's joining us from White Rock, BC. Thanks so much.
Thank you.